Hi everyone, welcome to the first of my videos on the astrology for 2026. And usually I do an annual workshop, so this would have been Goodbye 25, Welcome 26. This year I decided to create a series of videos, breaking it down into sections. So it's going to be free to everybody, and you can watch it at your leisure. And whatever sections, pieces are relevant to you. So I'll be covering um, the astrology for 2026, the coming year. There'll be one on crystals and energy techniques and things we can use to help us with the year. And there's so much going on that I might actually do a few more going into more details in particular areas. And if as a result of hearing anything that I'm saying, if you would like more information on a particular um, area aspect of something that I've mentioned, please do let me know, and I'll look into seeing whether that's something that I could enhance on and go more deeper on. And I'm no doubt there'll be more as the year goes on, because as I say, it's pretty massive, pretty mega this year. Um, I've already created two with regards to the astrology or coming into the year. And the first was for the winter solstice when I created a crystal grid from the chart for the day. And that is relevant because the solstice is the beginning of the next astrological quarter. So in this case, it would go from the winter solstice. This is from the Northern Hemisphere as well. Apologies if you're in the south, you need to reverse it. So it takes us from the winter solstice through to the spring equinox. Um, so although the solstice starts in December, it's actually covering obviously January, February, and most of March. So the chart for the moment that one of the quarter days, as the sun enters that new sign at the beginning of each quarter, that chart gives us the astrological weather, if you like, of that coming 3 months and the coming three signs. So you might want to go back to that and look at that and see if that resonates at all. And that's already on YouTube. And there's more details on the crystal grid I created on the Crystalwise website. And the other video I've already done was a guided meditation. And when I would do my workshops, I would normally start with a guided meditation to go back to 25 and to help to clear the old energies, to help us to go into the new. And that's what this one is. The way it came out this year, however, I did realize afterwards that you could adapt that for any year, or any moment in time, really, to turn around and look at what's behind you and go back and clear and transform. And you can repeat it. It doesn't matter that we're into January already. You can go back and do that at any time, or any time you feel that, sometimes with some coming going through the year, something might still come up from last year that we can could do with some help with clearing. So please do check those out. They're already on there. And what I'll be doing will be, the idea is that I'm going to be creating a series of these now, to look at the different aspects of 2026, the astrology, an overview, going into a little bit more detail, the crystals that we can use to help, other energy techniques. And I suspect that I'll probably be adding some during the year as well. So they'll be posting over the next couple of weeks, and I will try and create a separate folder um, for them so they'll all go in there as well. And I will repost links obviously on my social media. So those you can find are already posted. So I have been mega busy. I've got pages and pages and pages of notes about this coming year. I wasn't quite sure of the word to use there. I mean, last year I kept using the word potent and saying that there are a lot of activations. That was the word that came up that I never used before. Extraordinary can be overused. Unprecedented, a lot of people are fed up of hearing, but it is true. It is quite extraordinary this year, and I think the word that I sort of coined the other day was I was going huge, mega, monumental. I think was one that came up, but that will probably change all the time. So do there's lots to talk about, and there's lots to look into. But before we do look at the astrology for the year, we do have to look at the last year. Of course, astrology by nature of the way our solar system moves and how we feel and receive that, it is not linear. And for example, retrogrades can mean that planets move into a sign, and then they retrograde and they will go back into the previous one. And then when direct again, they will travel back into the new sign. So it's important to understand not just where the planets are now, but where they are in that cycle, what journey they have taken so far. And this is actually particularly important when we look at 2025 going into 2026. The outer planets, the biggies, the slower planets that therefore have more clout, more impact, they connect longer for a longer amount of time. And they are the bigger game changers. And those that contribute to longer term change and bigger impacts on our lives. So I'm talking about Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron. And of those six, in 2025, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune all change signs. And that is highly unusual, and quite obviously indicative of collective and personal change. If a planet changes signs, we feel that change of energy. Jupiter does change signs yearly, and it's not always considered an outer planet, but for the purposes of what I'm doing and its importance and what's going on, I have included it. But the others, and so that's we would expect to change that Jupiter to change signs during the year, but the others have cycles ranging from 29 to 165 years. So the probability of their sign changes coinciding coming into an alignment is quite low. And in addition, we had Saturn and Neptune entering the same sign, Aries, which represents the beginning of the zodiac. So when the sun enters Aries, that is in the Northern Hemisphere, the spring equinox represents a new start, a new cycle. It's the beginning of the astrological year, beginning of as well as the new quarter. So more on that later, and in the later videos, I will go through what is happening in 2026 with those two, Saturn and Neptune in particular, as the energy, as those two and the energies of Aries are key players. So heads up, have a look at your chart if you've got anything in early Aries. That's going to be quite potent for you. Or even in opposition or square, but it's definitely one to look out for, and one we will need to look at in some detail to understand its impact with the two of them. as they're sort of dancing around. So back to 2025, and it is important to get a sense that they dipped their toes in the water of these new signs. Actually, that's a very bad analogy with using water, because Aries is a fire sign, so maybe it would be more accurate. A better analogy would be that they lit their matches, their beacons, their torches, and began to shine their light outwards and to forge forwards, to show new ways to initiate, and we're bringing energies of self-awareness as well. And they were lighting the fires of our inner fires of mastery, self-mastery, and stepping into our soul mission, our soul plan. Collectively, this fiery spark lit fires of awakening, of questioning authority, and trusting more in our intuition and instincts. That's very important. Trusting our inner knowledge, our inner knowing, our inner truth. But many of you, given all this new energy and all this lovely bright fire and new beginnings, probably at this point, many of you are wondering, as you know, probably looking at what we're seeing in our media and alarming, worrying things that are happening on world which do not match that narrative. So what is going on, you might well ask? Well, with the natural rhythm and cycle of the planets, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, as I say, all enter new signs. And for a brief while, and then they started, all three of them started their retrogrades. And therefore, that retrograde cycle took them back into the previous sign. And this represents going back and finishing up old business. In particular, we'll look at Saturn and Neptune, who entered Aries, and the beginning of the zodiac, as I said. But that meant that when they retrograded back into Pisces, which is at the end of the zodiac. Let's also fill in a few other factors that contributed to the energies of 2025, and then whose combination created some potent points, times, and activations. So right back in January 2025, a year ago, the nodes which represent karma in the chart, they changed signs, with the South Node entering Virgo and the North Node going into Pisces. Just this one factor in the chart by itself would have taken our focus to clearing old karma, especially lower service energies and the awakening of our spiritual path, with the North Node in Pisces, what we're aiming for, what we're working towards. We then had, at the end of February, we had the new moon in, and by that time we had 6 planets or points in Pisces. Being the new moon, it's the sun and moon together, and they were at the back of these 6. Ahead of them were Saturn, Mercury, the North Node, and Neptune. So these were all in Pisces. And then ahead of them, forged ahead, was Venus, who had already gone into Aries. And what happened in brief terms over the following weeks and months was, with the Sun and Mercury as the 2 fastest moving, passed over the others. Excuse me, that's interesting, isn't it? I'm talking about Mercury, which is communication in the throat. I'll just have a drink. The Sun and Mercury passed over the others, so each time that's an activation when you get a planet passing over another, we call a conjunction. They're meeting at a point. That's quite a always an interesting energy. And the sun forged ahead then, so it was crossing Saturn, North Node, and Neptune. Mercury that did the same and entered Aries. And then Mercury retrograded and it went back into Pisces as well. Right. And Venus did the same. So we had Mercury and Venus going over them, activating them once, coming back and activating them again. And then when they had their direct phase, they went through a third time. So each time the slower moving planets would just moved a little bit further on themselves or were in a different part of their cycle. Too complicated to go into the individual points now. But there was a multitude, there were multiple activations of these and multiple activations around the last few degrees of Pisces. So then in addition, we then had, as I say, Saturn and Neptune retrograding, yeah, hooray, they've gone into Aries. Oh, got rid of all this Pisces energy. Oh no, we've got to go back again, and revisit. And they came back into Pisces. Saturn came back in on the 1st of September and Neptune on the 22nd of October. Saturn went back as far as 25 degrees of Pisces, but Neptune, having gone ahead further, was then and slower moving, only went a little bit back into Pisces and actually went back in and stayed within 29 degrees, didn't go back any further. So from that time, 22nd of October, Neptune has been at 29 degrees of Pisces, the very last degree of the zodiac, of the astrological wheel. And they have been edging forward still then, since then, obviously, and now mid-January, Neptune is almost, but not quite, in back into Aries. It comes, it's got another couple of weeks. It re-enters Aries on the 26th. And then Saturn joins on very early on the February the 14th. So that'll be the 13th in a lot of areas. So we've had a foray, you might say, into Aries, new beginnings, new cycles, and then going back into the old to finish off old cycles. And this often happens, and it's an interesting time as it sort of gives us a flavour of what can be when something enters a new sign. And it can get us about thinking about what we would like, how we would like things to be. And we can feel into those new possibilities and sense and imagine them. And then we go back to sort out what is left of the old that needs clearing out of the way. And sometimes it's not till we've had the taste of that new energy that we go back and go, no, this does not belong in the future. This is no longer in alignment with me. This is no longer how I want things to be. So sometimes we have to have that taste of the new, and it actually helps us when we go back to say, no, this is what needs to go. Helps us to clear the decks. So with the vibrational changes, the many light codes and upgrades we received in the last year, our physical and light bodies are operating at higher frequencies. And this is one of the key factors to remind ourselves of as we move forwards. The old 3D frequencies, that density cannot function in 4D or 5D. They have to be upgraded, transformed, transmuted. The dipping back into the end of the zodiac gave us the opportunity to see what was old density, and what didn't fit anymore, what wasn't and isn't aligned with our current and future path. So we are in the end phase, at the end of Pisces energy, this end of the zodiac, ending of cycles, and this there's been offering the chance to step off of the karmic wheel. This is why it's been really, really important to look into this stuff and face it. And when I say we can step off the karmic wheel, that raises a few eyebrows, but I'm assuring you, yes, that can and is happening. It is happening and it is possible. And the old world, as a result of all this, has been thrown into chaos. Various descriptions that have been used. Some people call it death throes of the old. There's also duality showing us, being shown to us. And it was back in September, I think I did a video stepping onto our future timelines, and I described how I saw at that time a split of timelines. The timelines were splitting, and it was time to choose which we wanted to be on. And that is still relevant now. And we need to keep reaffirming that choice and refocusing on the positive timeline, on love, on connection, our higher purpose. So with all this going on, it is no surprise that old karmic themes have been coming up, often surprising us with finer layers or octaves, you might call them. I could see that it was vital for us to release as much karma as we could. There was various points that came up during the year that led me to do some collective karmic healings. I don't know if you saw those, where I sent out energies that everyone could tune into for karmic healing. And I subsequently, as a result of doing those, introduced a new consultations, new healing sessions specifically aimed at karmic healing. And understandably, in the last year, they've been quite popular. I've continued to do them, and some of them are on a donation basis. So check those out. If they are if you feel they could help, if they would be of interest. So to give you a bit of an understanding of what the major themes might be in relation to what we're talking about and the type of karma that's coming up, let's have a quick look at what the combination of Saturn, Neptune, and Pisces created. So keywords include fear, authority, idealism, Karpman or drama triangle, guilt, shame, overwhelm, lack of connection to spirit, feeling that maybe is a wound, hopelessness, helplessness, truth or lack of truth, deception, lack of empathy is another one that's come to me as I'm talking. Something else flitted through my mind, and it's gone out the other side again. But those are some of the things to think about as to whether or not you saw those coming up in any way whatsoever. Oh, victim mode, that was what it was. But that's part of the drama triangle, but you might just see victimhood or victim type energies, but they don't exist usually without the other two roles being played. Look that up if you're not sure. Drop me a message if you want me to explain further. Happily do so. In addition, in the background, Uranus, which rules technology, dipped its toes into Gemini, an air communication sign ruled by Mercury. So this heightened communication And pairing with Pluto in Aquarius, another air sign, contributed to bringing AI into the mainstream at an alarming rate. Um, and this is also fast becoming an area where the truth can be difficult to ascertain or to be sure of. And that's something I'll talk more about in the 2026 as well. Towards the end of the year, something really unusual happened. Um, Looking at the degrees of where the outer planets, if you were to do your own chart and to list from 0 to 29, the degrees, not ignoring the sign, just the degrees, the number of where your planets are, and you list them against the number, you get a sense of the cycle of your personal cycle of processing. And it can, when you see it in that order, it's completely random. And I was following this and how the planets were moving, and it came into my head, I wonder if there would ever be a moment in time where they would be in the order that their order that we talk about them, so Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And it was one of those things that obviously I was given it to think about. I raised that question literally partway through the year, watching them and how they were moving about, especially with Neptune and Saturn sort of dancing around quite close together. And lo and behold, would you believe it, towards the end of the year they did. I never thought that's something that could actually ever happen. And what is the significance of that? Well, it meant that the faster moving planets, so obviously the moon very fast, cycling through quickly, but the ones that you could track more would be the sun every month going through from 0 to 29. So Sun, Mercury, Venus moving more quickly. Every time they went through the degrees of their new sign, they would activate those planets in order. There was it's like a deliberate activation of the energies in order. That is mega. That in itself, that sort of is the sort of thing that comes up, and I think that's no coincidence. And I think when I started seeing this, each time it happened, I coined the word activations rather than just transits and things moving and contact. This is contacting that, that's contacting this next. It was felt like a cycle, each one individual. So Venus might have gone over Saturn, then it might have gone, connected with Uranus, and then Neptune, and then Pluto. And each of those has got an individual interpretation by themselves, but they felt like series building on one another and creating something, activating something that was bigger than the sum of its parts, if that's the right phrase. Unlocking something and activating it. They were quite potent, and as I say, it felt quite deliberate. So that was very, very unusual, and something not to be ignored, really. And there were there were times when maybe 3, 4, 5 planets were at the same degree. And so you had a similar sort of thing as each moved, they would not just contact each other, but one would, as one moved on, it would activate and connect with the planet, and then the next one would. So there is many of these sorts of things going on in 2025, which created the whole. And the sort of activations I sense them, and it's very difficult to describe them in words. We've got a series going on at the moment, which is hard to explore, where we've had the Venus behind the Sun and Mars was in front, and then finally they sort of gradually caught up, the difference between them narrowed, and then we had a series of them all hopping over one another. And what's happened is, look at what's going on in the outer world. Venus has now taken the lead. Mars was in the lead before. And think about the masculine, feminine, the very simple terms, war and peace relationship of those. So and that's all playing out at the moment. I sort of, these activations, I sometimes see them as sort of almost like switching on a light. It's that, oh, that's come on now. Oh, that's come on now. So it's like you get so many lights on. Obviously, 3 lights on is going to shine more light than one. Very simple analogy again. If you watched me before, you must know I'm always saying simple. I like it simple. So it has been very difficult to interpret these. It's very obvious that there's something going on, these various series, and that they sort of, as I say, they added or build on each other, and it's the combined effect or power, the accumulation of them, that was something in addition to the individual. So that gives you a brief overview of some major influences of 2025, to give you a better background and better explain what is leading us into the new year, 2026. So 2025, those movements had provided the foundation, the basis, setting the themes for 2026. Another thing that I haven't mentioned, non-astrological, but it added strongly to last year's energies, was the numerology. And 2025, if you add the digits up individually, it comes to 9. So it's a 9-year, and that in itself indicates the end of a cycle, things needing to be finished and brought to a close. And so 2026 is 10 or 1, depending on how you interpret it. And there's both to take into account, I believe. And I'll talk more about that in a later video, when we look at the themes and influences of the year. So I hope, despite what you might see externally at the moment, knowing that that cycles ending, we have been ending cycles. Cycles are coming to the end, particularly cycles of karma. I hope that is encouraging to you, and you have seen and are continuing to see the light where the light is being shone, and there is a lot of positivity and there's a lot of growth, and what would be the phrase I would want to use? The underlying currents on the collective are building, and that is how change comes about. Yeah. An absolute key to 2026 astrology and creating the foundation for the beginning of the new cycle will be Saturn and Neptune, as I've already said, and re-entering Aries and establishing themselves there. Once they're there, they won't go back into Pisces again. That's it. They will be there. And I think I've already said Neptune goes in, give the dates again, 21st of January, Saturn on the 14th of February. So we're not quite out of that clearing phase yet. Soon will be, and that's when we will begin to feel a difference. But meantime, we've got another 2 weeks minimum of the old energies showing up, screaming loudly at us. Death throes, if you remember that phrase that came up. I quite like that. I think it's quite of an old order, quite indicative. And then got a little bit, another couple of weeks after Neptune with Saturn. So think about Saturn's themes of lack of fear, lack and limitation, authority. So those are the things to look out for and just be aware of, but we will gradually see the energies changing. Later in, just to give you a little bit of a heads up going on then, later in February we have with Saturn in on the 14th, later in February we have the first eclipse of the year. And another heads up is that those 2 weeks between the two eclipses, 2 weeks apart, is when the real awakening begins. I've heard it described as we are currently in hibernation, or we're in a cocoon phase, and that is when we're gonna things that are going we're sort of going to start coming out of our cocoon or our chrysalis. March is a potent month too, with that second and balancing eclipse, and then what happens is Saturn catches up with Neptune, and they finally meet after a long time sort of wrangling. Oh, and we've also in March we've got Mercury retrograde, first of the year, Saturn and Pluto connecting, and Uranus going direct. So just a heads up that March is pretty potent as well. The final heads up I'm going to give you is that I was talking earlier on about trying to find the right descriptive word for this year's energies, and July is the month to look out for. And this is where I came up with the word monumental. Once I saw the scale of what was going on, I literally had to, I was going through and looking at what was happening that month and what was coming into alignment. And I literally had to go for a walk afterwards to clear my head, as I couldn't believe that so many things came into alignment that month. And I just want to say it's good. Okay, the potential is huge, right? It's the connections that there are have huge potential for us to tap into. It is the most extraordinary astrology imaginable, with multiple connections between the outer planets. They all want in on it, and they're all connecting with one another, so they're all sort of coming in to the same similar sort of degrees. So it is absolutely mega. So this is going to be an amazing year. This can be an amazing year with huge potential. Please know that the death throes don't last forever, and what we will see will be an increasing reshifting. That's probably not in the dictionary, but I'm using it. A reshifting of power as more and more people stop giving their personal power away to outer authority. So self-authority is one of the themes that will be coming up with the Aries energy, self-authority, self-mastering, a lot of words beginning with self. And as I've already said, more on that next time. I'll leave it there for now. And thanks for listening and your continued encouragement and support. Please do get in touch if you feel I can help in any way, or if you have any questions. There'll be QR codes coming up at the end that will take you to either the Astrology Wise or My Crystal Wise website. Okay, thanks. Bye for now, and see you again soon.